a majority of people who present are presenting, but actually what is just taking place isn't actually about ruqya. So it's almost as though it's a convenient label, a convenient way of understanding a situation. That's not to say that these are people who are presenting who have mental health problems. But what this does mean is that we have ways of dealing with experiences of jinn, and there are ways of dealing with mental health. And there needs to be a discourse between the two. We need to work out where our protocols are for joint assessments and engage in a way which is actually supportive of Muslims, which actually takes on board both their faith and their psychological well-being.
Well, thank you for sharing your insights with us, Abdullah. I really appreciate you taking your time out. You're actually at a retreat, I believe, and yet you took time out to join us in the programme. If people want to know more about Abdullah Maynard's work, they can go look up Stephen Maynard and Associates. Coming back to yourself, we just talked there about jinn, black magic, mental health. Have you found in your practice these issues do become blurred?
These issues do become blurred because they feel that a non-Muslim therapist might not understand the cultural influence towards it or the religious understanding towards some of these issues, hence why they feel comfortable to come to a Muslim counsellor. In regards to what you mentioned earlier about thinking that they don't want to come to a Muslim counsellor because of the reputation and about other cultural aspects that come involved, I feel that's actually shifting now. I think people are becoming educated, and we can actually see within Muslim communities that people are aware that they aren't trained or equipped to deal with issues that Muslim people are facing, and we can actually see in mosques that there are counselling services being provided now for the community because they can actually see that there is a benefit by helping them emotionally. Well,
if we can just leave it there for part one, but do join us in part two for a fascinating discussion of mental health issues in the Muslim community. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to the Politics and Media Show, where tonight we're discussing mental health and Muslims. If I can come back to Polly, just before the break we were discussing how some people may actually not feel comfortable going to a Muslim counsellor. Sometimes you want to be anonymous. Some people feel embarrassed of being somebody who's maybe seen as too close to them because some people want to, when they're in distress, that's why they like to go to a professional, somebody outside of the community. Have you found this for other communities as well?
I think that's true. That's true of a lot of communities, and the stigma within a lot of minority communities is the same. And for example, you were talking earlier about people being seen as being possessed. And I was in a day centre once where someone came to visit one of the service users, and there was a complaint about the very loud praying that was happening in one of the rooms. It was someone from a Caribbean community who had clearly decided, she had decided that this young man was possessed, and that if she could do this prayer really loudly, that she could cleanse him in some way. So it's not uncommon for lots of different communities to have the same experiences, particularly around stigma. And because of the stigma within some of these communities, that's why people tend not to access professional services quite often.
And that could also be quite complicated for any government policy as well. As in, again, how do you distinguish between genuine services which people would want and services which may actually increase the stigma?
I do think though that the government, one of the things that the government fails to do on a regular basis is to access community assets. And I think that if you don't work with communities, then you will continue to fail. There are people in every community that do have the understanding, that do have the experience, that can advise you on what is important. You know, in the same way that a carer can, but might not have the confidence to do it because of the stigma attached. So I think that there needs to be much more acknowledgement and value of community assets.
So you're optimistic on the one hand that we have the capacity within the different communities, but you feel the government needs to
need to acknowledge that, and they need to give it some value. Absolutely.
Well, I see you're nodding away there. Have you, as somebody who's been trained in conventional psychotherapy, you're an integrative psychotherapist, and then developed Islamic counselling and put that in your practice, do you find sometimes it's something that you choose to apply and other times you don't, even within a Muslim family context?
Again, what I do is I have an assessment session, and within that assessment session I will have an understanding of what that what the concerns are for the client. I'll be able to have an idea of what sort of approaches would be helpful for them. They can also give me an insight as to what they would like to have in the counselling arena. Many clients that I have, the main reason that they do come to us, and we weren't actually just targeting the Muslim community, Sakoon Counselling Services is open to all communities. However, people do come to us because of the aspect that we do provide Islamic counselling. So yes, I do offer Islamic counselling to some clients and not to all. However, majority of the clients do want Islamic counselling.
So, without obviously giving away any details which would help identify an individual, can you give us some examples? I mean, whenever somebody's going through distress, they assume they're the only ones who ever felt this bad or been through situation. So again, for viewers who may not know how a professional context may work and may be afraid to approach a counselling service like yourselves or any of the others that we've heard about today, what kind of things do you deal with?
Well, just to kind of talk about, about the position, about the Islamic talk and the prayers, and how that was perceived quite differently. I do get a lot of clients in similar cases. The one I'll present here is I did have a client suffering from OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. And she actually initially went to a conventional therapist to overcome her problems. However, her therapist told her to not pray. Her issue was that she felt that she wasn't clean enough to pray towards God, and she felt guilty about this. And when the therapist said to not pray, that heightened her anxiety. So there's although this is a method in OCD to stop the prayers, there was a feeling of lack of understanding and a lack of empathy towards this client in order to help her. So what I did with this client at Sakoon is that, we focused on prayers and we concentrated on that, as well as using conventional techniques to help her. For example, exposure therapy, replacing negative thought patterns with positive thought patterns, diary taking, a number of techniques that we use. However, we did use Islam because that was something that was very, very important to her. And we looked at examples of the Prophet, peace be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the time of the Prophet, the way that they prayed, that it was in a place where it may have been dirty, like sand. And does that mean that prayers are not valid? So it was looking at things that were close to her heart to give her that justification that, what her thoughts are not logical. And that actually helped her to reduce the issues that she was facing, as opposed to just conventional therapy.
To use the faith as a means to hold on to and a way out of the situation that she was in.
Yeah, I think in addition to that, I think if there isn't an understanding of the culture in when you're looking at treatment and looking at recovery, you can make huge mistakes. There have been examples, for example, in the Caribbean and African community, one of the things that we do is we put rice out on a tray and pick out all the black ones. I don't know if you do that within your community, but there have been incidents of people being deemed to be in relapse for counting rice, because that's how it was seen from the naked eye, because the person that was making that judgment had no understanding
that it's actually a normal
that it's
thing,
a normal everyday thing. And that's a really basic example, but it can make a huge difference to someone's recovery process. And so there has to be that understanding. You have to use the community assets that there are to develop an understanding of the community that you serve.
And I feel that is what's missing when it comes to helping clients from ethnic communities, because that is the key to success, to help them. Because there are cases when it doesn't work, when conventional therapy doesn't work.